All right, here we go. We're at 2:05 now, so we are now on for the Running Warehouse Runners Series Community Talk. You are here with me, Nathan Doig. Bit of background, I am a two-time 1500 metre WA State Open champion. I'm also a 20-year and current AFL boundary umpire. I've been with Running Warehouse for the past 8 years. I do the shoe reviews, I do some of the buying. I've done plenty years of retail, and I was also a remedial massage therapist for 10 years, working with state, national and international athletes. And I have with me Stuart Caulfield.
Yep, so I've been at Running Warehouse now for about 9 years. So I've spent plenty of time in retail, serving a lot of customers, done a fair bit of customer service stuff with the company as well. And now mainly I sort of focus on buying most of the shoes that you see on our website and in our retail stores. So, outside of that, I'm spending a lot of time looking at shoes with brands and seeing the new innovation and stuff like that. So we get to see the front line of shoes. Prior to that, I went to university and I did a sports science degree. I did my honours in exercise physiology, so I actually did an honours project on foot strike in runners. So yeah, I was spending a lot of time looking at people running on treadmills and stuff like that. Outside of that, my own running, I spent a few years there chasing times on tracks and, in my late teens, early 20s, and doing, cross country. I represented the state at national cross country a few times before stepping up to marathon distance, where I ran Perth Marathon, and it must have been 2017. And then, last couple of years I've more shifted into, a few trail races, a few ultra runs, but basically, I'm trying lots of different distances, trying lots of shoes, and have a fair bit of time to do that. So it's good.
All right, so today's talk, we're going to focus on carbon plate shoes, or more super shoes, I think, for racing and training, go through some of the benefits, pros, cons, answer some of your questions that you have already sent in, and we will hopefully get a quick Q&A as well at the end. So, Stu, did you want to run through kind of basically what is a super shoe or a carbon shoe or a plated shoe?
Yeah, sure can. So, I think with super shoes, there's probably no hard definition of what a super shoe is. This is where we sort of, everyone's going to have their own way of talking about a carbon shoe, but we would generally say that a super shoe has a couple of key components, and that's something that we can, define and look at in shoes. The first one, and probably the most important thing with the shoes, is going to be the foam. So, it was going to be 5-6 years ago, we'd say that a carbon shoe has to have a PEBA foam. Now there's a few different ways that you can get these super responsive foams, but having a foam that's going to have a lot of compliance, so compliance is the amount of squish you get in a foam, and resilience, which is the amount of energy return. So a highly compliant and a highly resilient foam is probably the first key features I'd say a super shoe has to have. The next key feature we'd then go into would be a stiffening agent. So, a lot of the shoes on the table here are going to have a carbon fibre plate, but some of them will use, there's plastic plates, there's carbon rods, there's different things there. And then lastly, I'd say is that rocker, the geometry, the higher stack, so things like that. So they're probably the three key things for me that I'd say if a shoe has a super new age sort of foam with its highly compliant and resilient, a stiffening agent, so your plate, whether that's plastic, carbon, whatever, and then some form of sort of geometry where you're utilising that stack height to get a bit of a rocker. So for me, that's what I'd say is a carbon shoe.
And really, we've got kind of almost three foams which we'd put in that classified as a super foam if we're talking about it, or maybe like a PEBA, a TPU, a TPE. Those would be the three foams that I would classify as kind of the super foams, and you can get them kind of in different blends and have them infused with different things to create different air bubbles to make them softer, more comfortable underfoot, and keep that responsiveness nature that the foams allow.
And I think, like I said, I think when in 2016, 2017, when Nike first came out with their carbon shoe, for the first few years there, probably most people would have said that to make a super shoe, you need to use a PEBA foam because that was, at the time, that was the lightest, springiest foam that you could get. I think we're now seeing, with the new generation, you're seeing these TPU foams like Puma, they're using a TPU foam. Like these other foams are they're finding ways to sort of change the structure of them where you're getting, other options for making a super shoe that's not just a PEBA or a PBAX foam.
Yeah. I think the other thing which will relate into kind of the super shoe, carbon shoe, is your own personal physiology as well. And again, I know, Stu, you have thoughts on this.
Yeah. So like we can dive into a bit of maybe the physiology of where these shoes come into play of your performance and how they're gonna, how they really benefit you in running. So in terms of like long distance running, there's probably three key areas that we really look at and say what's going to make you a better runner. How do you define how good a runner's going to be? The first area we look at is your VO2 max. So that's basically your top end, how big your engine is, sort of thing. So it'd be around your 3K, your 5K pace. So this is an aspect of your physiology that's largely genetic. Choose your parents if you want a higher VO2 max. You're going to be able to train it a bit. So in your younger years when you're doing those really hard sessions and stuff like that, that's when you're building up your VO2 max. But for athletes that have been running for more than a few years, like you're not going to see big changes in this. Like, it's probably at a pretty set point. Season to season, you'll see some variation, but that's a relatively sort of steady point. So VO2 max is the first area of your physiology that's going to determine your performance. The next area you'd go into would be your lactate threshold. This is going to have a lot of different names. So ventilatory threshold, LT1, depending on who you talk to, they'll have a different name for it. But basically, this is about the pace you can hold for somewhere around 40 minutes to an hour. So for a lot of people, you'll say your half marathon pace is about where your lactate threshold is. Now, this one's highly trainable. So this is what you're doing. You're doing your marathon sessions. You're doing all your training to try and push this up to the highest percentage of your VO2 max. So say, if you think of an analogy like a car, if the rev limiter's, 10,000, where that red line starts, that's going to be your lactate threshold. So this is, just below this is sort of marathon pace. So this is probably the most trainable area of your physiology that you're looking at. And then the last area that we get into is your running economy. So running economy, once again, very trainable. It's something that over years of running, you're going to improve your running economy. So if we go back to the car analogy, this is kind of like your fuel efficiency. This is something that, if you look at some top runners, like when Paula Radcliffe ran the world record for the marathon, her VO2 max didn't change too much over her career. Her lactate threshold didn't change too much, but her running economy improved a lot over the years. And this was pre-super shoes. But this is also the one factor where these sorts of shoes come into play. So out of the three factors that build a good runner, running shoes have a benefit to one of those areas. So, when you see companies coming out and saying, look, you're getting a 4% benefit or you're getting whatever percentage benefit, it's not, don't take your time and then go 4% off that, that's what I'm going to run. You get a 4% improvement in your running economy. So it's just one of the factors. For some people that may translate exactly to a 4% change in time, but don't be disappointed if you're like, I didn't necessarily notice a change in time, but you just got better economy is the idea there.
So you mean I still need to train?
A few hours will help.
Oh, geez. Okay. All right. So let's get into it. Something benefits of super shoes. We've kind of touched on it a little bit. They're more cushioned because of the foams. They're more responsive because of the foam and the plate.
Yep.
In combination, and kind of who can it benefit as well?
Well, we've named this chat a carbon shoe chat. Carbon is getting a lot of excitement. Once again, the foam's the exciting bit about these shoes.
Yeah, you're going to hear us talk a lot about the foams, I think, more than the carbon plate.
Yeah, it's like the carbon is the bit that gets the publicity. I think that was, something that a lot of people got excited about. Carbon plates in a shoe was the crazy bit, but the foam is what's doing the work. So a lot of the early research has sort of looked at, where is the benefit coming from in these shoes, and initially, like once again, if we go back a few years now before carbon plates, before these max stack shoes, the only way to make a shoe more efficient was to go lighter. So we have an example of that one here. So something like this. So this was actually my shoe. I used to race, on the road 10K up to sort of half marathon distance in something like this. The only way to make you more economical in a racing shoe at the time was to go lighter. So this shoe weighed about 80 grams. It's made of nothing. It's a bit of an outsole. Downside to this was you didn't walk for a week after racing in it. So it's...
Well, I think we can answer a question. One of the questions was, can we explain what we mean when we talk about stack heights? So a really good way to show this is the stack height is kind of the difference between the heel and the forefoot, and how much is under your foot and between the road. And then you've got something like the Adidas Adios Pro 3 here, where you get 39 mils of foam in the heel, and I think about 33 off the top of my head in the forefoot. So you've got almost 40 mils of foam under your heel with a stack height difference of 6. So it's the stack height is the amount of foam under your foot. Thanks, Stu, for that.
Yeah, so basically with these shoes, like I said, before super shoes, the only way to make them sort of faster, more efficient was going lighter. So since then, we've then obviously got these super foams. So basically the studies have shown that from the foam, if we're working off that initial Nike study that had around that 4% benefit of these shoes, which is somewhere in the ballpark. Look, there's been lots of studies. There's been some studies that have shown benefits up to 11% for some people. There's been some studies that it's a little lower, sort of that around that 2%. But basically, all the research is suggesting that basically everyone's going to show an improvement in running economy in these shoes. So if we work off about that 4%, the foam was showing somewhere around that sort of 2 to 3. So you're getting most of your benefit out of that foam. The plate alone, they said it, they seem to think it's somewhere around 1. So if we go, that's equaling up to that 4%, you're getting most of it from the foam, a little bit from the plate. There's some interaction that sort of goes on there where that's increasing that benefit, because the plate alone, it was just under 1 sort of thing, a lot of the studies have suggested. So you're not actually getting a lot from that. Even if you chuck a plate in a normal EVA foam, which is what a sort of standard running shoe is, there wasn't a huge benefit to it. So although the plate's the bit that gets the excitement, it's probably the least exciting part of the shoe for us.
And those plates have been dabbled with, even kind of in the mid to late 90s. I'm showing my age here now. But companies did dabble with putting carbon plates in your traditional EVA racing flats, let's call them, because they were in those days. And you kind of never saw that come to the masses like it has now today with the foams that we have. And Stu also mentioned you'd be hobbling around the next day after racing in such a lightweight racing shoe. That's another one of the benefits. We're not hobbling around as much the day after. We're able to go and maybe not do a session the day after, but keep loading going, keep training going in the days after. So the recovery is a lot quicker. Guys can run a lot more. People can run more marathons or more races throughout the year. So I would put that also as another benefit of these new foams and super shoes.
I think it's an area maybe that the research hasn't really, maybe it's a hard research to sort of come up with a way to look at it, but it's something when we haven't necessarily seen translate into research. But anecdotally, you are seeing that a lot, where people are saying these shoes, you pull up a lot better in them. That means you can train more. That's a huge benefit if you're going to be able to, do a few more marathons a year, and that's what you love doing, then that's great. I think that's a massive benefit to these shoes is that leg saving, which is hard to sort of quantify, and probably none of the companies have done any research yet to really give us any true values on what the recovery benefits are there. But anecdotally, you see it a lot. We hear it from runners where, you're seeing a lot of even Australia now, you're seeing a lot of our top marathoners, top women, they're having longer careers than they ever have. Like our current Australian female marathon record holders in her early 40s, which, I mean, I'm only in my early 30s and I don't think I could finish a marathon in this shoe and do another one next year.
Well, we can kind of go on a little off track here again and answer another question is, do the super shoes, do they offer enhanced cushioning? I think we've been through that. Yes, the cushioning is much better in these. But the other part of that question was, can it help absorb impact, reduce stress on joints and prevent injury? Now, Stu, what are your thoughts on that?
It's an interesting one. Like, I don't think we've seen injury rates change. So, there's nothing suggesting that, there was a big barefoot movement in the early 2010s sort of thing and everyone was going that way and maybe people thought that was the solution to injuries. There's all these ebbs and flows in footwear and the technology, but injury rates aren't changing significantly. Maybe what is changing is where we're getting the injuries and where we're seeing people injured. So, with these shoes, you can't remove a load. Like, we're not, breaking physics here. The force you're hitting the ground with is the force you hit the ground with. So it's going somewhere, but maybe the stiffer plates, the rocker geometry, it's taking loads off, whether it's your Achilles, your calf, it's shifting the load. So I think a lot of the research, like Mizuno, I know their super shoe, they had a lot of data that said that it took somewhere around sort of 15% of the load off the calf. That's then going somewhere. Hopefully that's to the bigger muscle groups. So you're looking at your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, which, in the back end of a marathon, you'd rather the big muscles have to deal with, a bit of the load than shifting it down to the lower leg. So that's sort of what we're seeing, that sure they are benefiting recovery, but we're not changing injury risk significantly. Maybe that's because now you are feeling better, you do more, so then it just keeps injury rates the same, but we don't really have clear data on that yet.
Well, we're runners, more is always better, right?
Exactly.
Selecting the right shoe for you. What are your thoughts on that one, Stu?
Yeah, I think it can be tough. It's probably the area that I'd say if we, with the shoes that I'd say needs a bit of development and hopefully, in 3 years' time you can come into a running warehouse store and you can walk in and you can tell us your weight and your distance and, what shoes you've run in the past and your injury history, and we can go, look, you need a plate that's this angled, you need a foam that's this soft and stuff like that. I think at the moment, these shoes have been out for 5-6 years. A lot of the companies are only just getting into their second, third version of each of the models. So it's a lot of sort of trial and error at the moment. We're in the lucky position where we get to trial a lot of shoes. We get to see the direction they're heading and stuff like that. So we probably have a little bit more, idea of our own preferences, but that seems to be a pretty good guide at the moment. So if you're going to come into a store and say, look, I've tried one of these shoes and I loved how soft it was, or, the rocker, whether you know where the benefit came from or not, but if you just said it felt good, the roll was smooth and that's what I like, that's where we're going to be able to come in, our retail staff or anyone in the store is going to be able to help you out and go, look, here's stuff we can recommend in a similar area. And that just gives you more of an idea to maybe, next time you go in and if you want to try something different, you can go, look, I loved this, but I want softer or I want firmer. And it is a little bit of trial and error. But I'd say that's probably where we're at the moment in terms of selecting the right shoe for you.
Yeah, because I know we have discussions out the back and we talk about what you like and what I like and they can be two vastly different things, what we're looking for in a shoe as well, our backgrounds, our history. I came from the track, so I like a really fast toe off in my shoe. So for me, something like the Mizuno Rebellion series has that rocker through the toe and it gets me onto my toes really fast and I really like that. And so I think if you're talking to different runners or talking to people in the shop and finding out what they like and what type of runner they are as well, that'll help you select the best shoe for you also. Yeah,
and I think that's another thing when looking at reviews. Like I even notice now, in even our own retail stores, like we get a lot more customers now will say, I've read reviews on this, I've read reviews on that. And I think an important thing with shoe reviews is, even though Nathan and I, through a lot of discussion, about shoes, trying on shoes, we know that we have sort of different preferences. But if you look at us on paper, we're a similar weight, we have similar PBs. You could argue that we should like a similar shoe, but we have very different preferences, and that's why when looking at reviews, you want to look at some reviews where it's a few people, because two of very similar runners can run in the same shoe and have a vastly different experience, whether that's, looking at this minor differences in your biomechanics or, injury history or mobility and things like this come into play, which, there's no real way to measure that, but it's something that should be taken into account when trying on shoes. So, yeah, if you're looking at reviews or, you have questions, watch lots of different people. Ask lots of friends. Don't just have one friend say, hey, this is the best shoe. I ran a marathon PB. This is going to be the best one for you. You need to try a few different ones, I think, is probably the way to go to find what works for you.
Unfortunately, it's not a definitive answer, but it is the best answer we can give, with everything that is out there. And Stu mentioned physiology and biomechanics, and that's where I think Stu and I differ in our not likes and dislikes for shoes, because
I got a Cliff Young shuffle.
I have a more loping style, and so I want something which is soft underfoot but then gives me a fast toe off. And as I said, I came from a track background, so I really enjoy that fast toe off. And where Stu, maybe not as bad as Cliff Young, but
yeah, I'm a lot more marathon, less just plodding along. Don't have that fast toe off, so it's a very different preference.
But you get your legs through underneath you a lot faster cadence than I would, whereas I'm longer and a little bit lopier. So what I'm searching for is different to what you're searching for. And so if you are reading these reviews, try and find someone who kind of is similar to you as well, and then you're going to have a reasonable ballpark of they liked these 3 shoes, they didn't like these 3 shoes. Well, maybe I can go in store and try those ones on then and see how they feel.
Yeah.
The future of racing in super shoes, and where do you think it's going? What do we see? Because we might see a little bit more than someone else.
Yeah, look, I think we get a little bit of an insight into what's coming. So, we're probably seeing shoes 6 to 12 months ahead of you guys getting to buy them and try them. But brands are working well ahead of that. So, we've spoken with brands before, and they're 3-4 years down the line. And that's, sometimes we get shared little bits of info there, but a lot of the times that's behind closed doors. That's stuff they're doing. So we get a bit of an idea. It seems at the moment, I think, that we're back onto a weight race. You've seen Adidas with the $750 Adios Pro Evo, getting back down to similar weights to something like the Mizuno had there. I think their racing shoe was about 120 grams-ish, something like that off the top of my head, whereas, the rest of these carbon shoes at the moment, you're looking at around that sort of 200-ish.
Yeah, 200, 230 is currently.
It's pretty standard.
We're getting back into the lightweight race, which I'm all for.
Yeah. So, downside at the moment with the Adidas one specifically is durability. Like they've openly said you're buying a $750 shoe there and use it for one race. But the more companies that are going, let's bring out these super light shoes. That means that there's factories making them, there's machines doing this, and that'll hopefully bring that price down. And we're back onto we're getting the benefits of these super shoes, and we're back going lighter. Which once again, lighter's always going to be faster with your shoes. So yeah, I think that's one area where we're going to see a lot of development.
Yeah, I think the Adidas shoe, yes, they say it's best for one race. We're still not even sure how long that will last as well, because I remember when the Vaporfly 4% first came out as well, they were like, oh, well, it's probably going to be good for one race.
Yeah,
and they weren't sure after that as well. So I think as these shoes, they're around in the market for a lot longer, people are putting them through their paces, we're going to find out exactly what they can and can't do. And yes, Adidas has, again, a completely different kind of way of processing their foam. So they've gone, well, we know this is going to last a tune-up run and then a marathon, and then we're not sure after that. It's kind of like a best before and an expiry date a little bit. It's not a firm expiry date, but we know it's going to be best for this.
Yeah. And I think like that, once again, that was something with the early super shoes that probably scared a lot of people in terms of that durability. Like you were telling people that, this shoe's $100 more than you've ever spent on a race shoe, and you're being told you can use it for one race, which I think we're pretty confident now is maybe not the case. Like, I've had super shoes that I've put more Ks into than I ever would have put into a standard EVA sort of daily trainer. I find that the life of a lot of these shoes, depending on the compound they're using in these foams, is really good. Like, they're seeing response in some shoes. Like, some of the testing is showing that right up to that sort of 500 to 800K, you're still getting a similar, if not better, foam than you would with a brand new EVA foam. So, the life of these shoes, the foam now seems to be pretty durable in most of them, barring, maybe some of these super light ones that are coming out. The downside, obviously, being racing shoes, they're going to go super lightweight with the upper. They're going to go pretty minimal on an outsole. So, you're probably going to see that part of the shoe give out long before you feel the foam become completely dead in these.
Yeah, and so the future is obviously the weights, first and foremost. I think we're seeing companies play with geometry now as well. Mm-hmm. If again, we pull up the Mizuno shoe here, that's a pretty wild geometry, but it gives you a lot of foam in that midfoot, and so I like a soft shoe. I get a lot of foam. That's great for me, but then the plate's going to stiffen it up, and I get that nice fast toe off that I want. Other shoes do that as well in different ways, but we're seeing more companies play with different geometries. You see the Puma Fast RB,
Mm-hmm.
Their rule, which is obviously illegal for the elites. But
I mean, how many people are elite? The rest of us can use it.
But you see them playing with multiple plates and the different geometry as well, and so I think companies are playing with these geometries, the different upper materials. How can we make them lighter and more comfortable as well? Because those sometimes early iterations didn't have the most comfortable upper, and so how can they get a nice lockdown with such a stiff midsole, but also keep it comfortable on foot as well?
Yeah, and I think Mizuno's been pretty open with the fact that they said they want to be, their view is that all the super shoes are kind of at a similar level now in terms of the performance you're going to get. Once again, you can skew it person to person and stuff like that. But basically, we would argue that a lot of the top brands now, they're all on a pretty similar sort of playing level. But Mizuno have said that they want to be the leader in the geometry, so that shape of the foam. And with World Athletics having that stack limit, so for those that don't know, no shoes allowed to be higher than a 40 mil stack. They measure it in the heel. So for athletes to be using it at the Olympics, it's not allowed to be above 40 mils of foam through that heel there. And you're only allowed to have one stiffening agent or plate in there. So with the AD1, they're using rods. With Mizuno, it's a plate. But you can see that that's actually forcing brands to innovate now. So like Mizuno, if you measure that heel a little bit further forward than where the World Athletics measure it, that's going to be well over 40 mil, which technically would break the rules. So they've innovated. They've found a way around it. Going higher stack, they've looked at that and they've gone, maybe the having a higher stack might not necessarily change performance-wise, but it gives them more room to play with the angles of the plates and different things like that, and see how that's going to affect things. And obviously their testing showing that it's increasing performance. But yeah, these World Athletics rules, I think a lot of people were angry at them at first that they were sort of stopping the innovation, but it's kind of forcing brands now to innovate and come out with ways where they're playing around with the foams and stuff like that. Like, I know Puma's, their new TPU that they're using, their super foam, they've said, look, all the brands are, once again, kind of similar in the energy return. So we're up around that sort of 75 to 85% energy return, which seems to be about as good as you can get at the moment. But they've gone, how about we test that at the end of a marathon? And they found that, while, once again, this is their data, so it could be skewed.
Take from that what you know.
But they're saying that, at the end of a marathon, a lot of these ones that start off at 80% energy return, by the end of a marathon, you're down around that sort of 65, 70, whereas a TPU, which they're using, they found that theirs actually maintained up around that sort of 80. I believe it was somewhere around that. So they're actually looking end of the marathon, what's the foam like, which it's not a fun study. I don't know who would sign up for getting to the end of a marathon just to test a shoe. But they've clearly managed to do it, and that's what they're seeing with their foam. So, yeah, it is forcing brands to innovate.
Yeah, exactly. And whilst we've mainly spoken about road shoes here at the moment, trail is almost a very new realm for these foams as well, where these companies are starting to bring in these super foams and different plates. And so another question we had was some of the trail super shoe options and whether we think carbon plastic plates are more appropriate. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, trail can definitely be a tricky one because I think, as we spoke before about, there's three sort of factors that come into running performance. That's on a road where you're running as hard as you can for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever it is. Trail's a very different beast. There's the terrain, there's the hills, there's a lot of different factors that come into play. So if we're talking purely from a performance running point of view, I think the trail companies, trails have been slow to uptake these shoes because there is a clear benefit to them. But on the other side of that is how much time are you then going to lose on the technical section? So a couple of the brands, like we've seen in the last 12 months, that brands are now coming out with these super shoes. So, Asics have one, Addy have one, Hoka have, one where they're bringing in these foams and they're implementing plates in them, but to a slightly different degree. So with Hoka, they've sort of gone with a split plate there where it's sort of giving you a little bit more give for that more technical terrain. But on the runnable sections, you're getting the benefits, the same benefits you get on the road. You can get out of these shoes. So I think it probably comes down to where you're racing, what's your that I've even heard interviews with a lot of the athletes, like Jim Walmsley, who's he was a big part of the development of this shoe with Hoka, and he's talked about the fact that it might be for his 100-mile races, that might be the perfect shoe for the back half of it, but a different shoe is better for the first half, and then you weigh up, are you changing shoes mid-race and stuff like this. So, yeah, learn the course, and, if it's a pretty runnable course, I think these super shoes are great. Like, I've used them for a few different races, and I think they're great, but Perth has pretty mild trails, so I think you can get away with a lot of road shoes. But it's the stability that you lose, basically. Same with anything where you're going up higher in stack or soft with the foam. It's the stability is the factor that is really the limiting point there.
And I think how comfortable you are as well on the trails. I mean, I come from the road. I've tested a few of these super trail shoes, and my comfort levels are probably going to be a lot lower than someone who's used to being out on the trails and bombing down descents. And so what I find dangerous might just be someone's everyday afternoon run. So you have to take a lot of your personal experience into account as well. But I definitely think there are better trail options for different terrains, and each company makes their plate a little bit different. So for me, I'll talk about the Metafuji Trail from Asics. For me, going downhill, this is a very dangerous shoe because of the amount of bounce out of that top PEBA layer that I got and how kind of firm that carbon plate is. And so for me, it's a little bit dangerous. But on anything fire traily, boy, this thing can rip. So maybe not a technical option for me.
But it's finding that balance.
But it's finding that balance for you, exactly. So again, a bit like in the road where you like one thing, I like another, we're definitely starting to see those options in the trail as well. And this shoe is going to give me this amount of grip and this amount of kind of stability underfoot. Well, that's what I'm looking for this race.
Yeah, no, I think it's exciting that trail, like I said, I think they fell behind for a while there. Like, there was all this development in the road and trail people didn't seem to mind. But coming from a road background, I was like, well, I'm running in these great shoes on the road. I would love something great for the trail. And it seems to be it's been a bit of a slower step. And that was probably because the trail community in general were like, well, we're fine. We're running just as fast in the shoes we've got. But they're now sort of, there's quite a few good options, and I've enjoyed testing them, and I think it's something that is going to make a big difference in the next couple of years for a lot of trail runners.
I not only think the trail side of it was a little bit slow, but I think we're just starting to see kind of PEBA or superfoams move into your everyday daily trainers as well, and I think people are going to start to see the benefits of that as well. And for me, I think that's an area that kind of was missing for a long time also.
Yeah, the Super Blast, there's no moving past that in terms of if you're talking about bringing that sort of tech from a road shoe, the super shoes into a super trainer, which, that seems to be a sort of a category at the moment where a lot of the brands are moving, like you said. It was popular. Like that shoe disappeared quickly in Australia, and we're seeing it, a few of the brands now have options like that. Like we've got the Balos from New Balance. New Balance, they have a couple of options there. They have one with a plate, one without a plate and stuff like that. But, with the testing and showing that PEBA, it doesn't even have to be PEBA now. Like I said, there's other foams, but these super foams are clearly better than an EVA or just a plain EVA. So bringing them into the daily trainers, you're seeing people get that performance out of these shoes. So, yeah, Super Blast is just that full bed of the same shoe same foam as you're getting in a racing shoe without the carbon plate.
No plate in that at all.
Yeah, which a lot of people love that because, like I said, the plate can be scary to people. Data's still up on if the plate makes a difference with injuries, but a lot of people are still worried having that stiff plate in there that, their legs are going to get weaker or something like that. I lean on the side of I don't think that's the case, but, each to their own.
One of the questions is, can you do all your runs in a carbon-plated shoe?
This one will probably...
This one hits home a bit?
Yeah. So I have a specific injury where I run almost exclusively in carbon shoes. That's not necessarily what I would recommend to everyone, but I've been doing it for plenty of years now and I haven't seen a downside to it. So, generally I think we would recommend, it's the same as everything, avoid the extremes. So, I wouldn't be doing probably everything in my carbon shoes, but I'm also not buying a carbon shoe, putting it on the shelf and waiting until I'm running a marathon. I'd say they probably need to be used in your training. Once again, we've talked about the benefits of them. So, those are benefits that you want in your training. So using them, I'd say probably if you're doing 2 sessions a week and a long run, probably you're fine throwing them on for your 2 sessions. You at least want to have them on for a long run or 2 before your race. I don't see the reason if you're doing faster long runs, chuck them on, do the whole run in them. But yeah, like I said, I see that they're beneficial in terms of the efficiency, and maybe even without my injury, there's a chance I'd still be doing a lot of my runs in them because you pull up better. They feel good underfoot. So that's sort of where I sit.
I think it depends what kind of runner you are also. So for me, I maybe don't do as many Ks. I'm not the mileage hog that you are. I don't do as many Ks as you. So I like to dabble in a little bit of everything. Let's call it a balanced diet.
Smart. Once again, smarter option.
I still train in some super shoes which are plated. I will, and I probably have the benefit also of having a larger quiver than a lot of people of shoes, but I would still, before I really worked in running stores, I would still have kind of 3 or 4 different shoes. I'd have a daily trainer, I'd have a lightweight trainer, and then I'd have a couple of racing shoes, and I still think having a couple of shoes is a great option because you're getting different stimulus as well on your body. So I like to have a shoe which has a little bit more flexibility through it. So and then I might pick again a shoe for my longer run where I want to pick up the pace a little bit, and I'll choose a softer foam with a plate in it then, because it's easier to pick up the pace then. And obviously I would still like to have a PEBA or super foam racing flat, well, not flat anymore these days, are they?
Racing high stack.
Racing shoe to be able to train in and race in. So I think having a few options gives you a more well-rounded diet.
And I think that's probably one of the areas that we can be more confident on about sort of reducing injury is having, I think you can chat to physios, you can chat to, like, it's one area where if you have a couple of shoes where you're rotating through, we can be reasonably confident in saying that that's going to reduce your risk of injury, because like Nathan was saying there, that you're loading, your biomechanics is going to be slightly different in every shoe. So you're going to be loading things differently. And so having a couple of shoes to rotate through, if you can afford it or want to put that much time and effort into your running, that's a great option. But there are also companies now coming out with shoes. If you're like, hey, one, I don't want to put that much money into my running. I just run a few times a week, or I just want one shoe that does a bit of everything. Companies have, they've heard that, and they have shoes in that area. So, Saucony is probably the most popular in that area with the Endorphin Speed, which I guess in terms of footwear, it sits in between your super trainer and your race shoes, where you're getting, we have one here. So it's the foam, same foam as you're getting in the race shoes. Uppers, you're getting, it's a little bit more plush, a little bit more accommodating, not, the super lightweight one of your racing shoe, but it's got that good foam. It does have a plate in it, but it's going to be a more flexible plate, so you're getting a bit of give in it. So it's a shoe where you're not going to be no one's going to be mad to race in that. That's a really good shoe to race in. But also, if you're just going to use that for a 5K jog, a 10K jog, or your long run, it also still feels good for that. So you're getting the benefit of the race shoes, but you're also fine sort of training in it. So that's a sort of solution if you're like, hey, I'm not the kind of person that's going to have a one race shoe, a super shoe for, my long runs, and then a really soft shoe for my easy runs or something like that. There's you can go for a one shoe quiver. That's fine.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to try and get to some more of these questions now, and then hopefully we're going to have the tech capability to get you to ask some questions live also. So if the chat function is working, let's try and use that. If it's not working, try and raise your hand, and we'll try and get you asking a question live, but we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, let's jump through a few more of these questions. We've kind of answered a few as we've gone. So one of them was the trail super shoe options. I think we've been through that. Yep.
I think just make sure you know the trails you're running on. More flexible, lower stack is going to be obviously safer on the super technical stuff. If it's super runnable, there's no reason to stick away from some of these shoes that are maybe going to be a bit stiffer and have that new age foam.
Yep. Cushioning and support. So again, we answered this one quickly a little bit. The super shoes offer enhanced cushioning, which can absorb impact, reducing the stress on the joints and prevent injury. Well, no, the load has to go somewhere. Yes, they are definitely softer, more cushioned underfoot, which is always nice, especially as you get older like me. And then in the second part to that, they are running a marathon. It's 70% hard pack trail and 30% road, and want to get an idea of a suitable racing shoe for that surface combination.
Yeah, I've done plenty of trail races in a road shoe, but that's because I'm coming from a road background, and I personally prefer the feel of a road shoe. I've grown up running in road shoes. That's the shoes that I'm comfortable in. So in that case, I probably sacrifice a bit of function of the grip of these shoes and go with personal comfort there and what I'm used to. We would always recommend when buying shoes, especially for like a marathon distance or something like that, pick a shoe that's going to feel comfortable in the last 10K, not the first 10K. So, you might grab one of these super shoes and you go, wow, I feel quick and fast and it's super light. But if at the end of the day you're going to be, you're no longer running on your forefoot, you're now running on your heels, and, you're not doing 4-minute Ks, you're doing 6-minute Ks by the end of the race, maybe a speed goat is going to feel better for you than one of these sort of super light racing shoes. So, if it's pretty runnable stuff, I see no reason why not just use what the shoe you're using on the road at the moment. Or that's where, like I said, these new shoes.
Yeah, exactly. So I would, again, am I going to buy one shoe just for a particular race, or is this something I'm going to do a little bit more of? So if I've got a shoe which has some decent grip underfoot, if it's a road shoe and it's a hard pack kind of trail, I'd probably use the road shoe with some decent grip, because I know I'm going to be comfortable in it if I've used it before. Or again, if I know I'm going to be doing more races like that, okay, I might try, that more trail shoe, which is built off that super shoe background, which again I know will be comfortable at the end when I'm hurting the most. Recommended marathon racing shoes this is the question, for an average 3:15 to 3:20 male marathon runner.
That's on the upper end of average. It's pretty, I think around that 3 hours pretty decent, isn't it? That's
very decent.
Boston qualifier.
Very decent.
So once again, they have done studies on this. So they've looked at a lot of the super shoes and at different paces for different people. I think there's some studies that show that average runner actually gets more benefit. So if we go back to that running economy, and that's where you're getting the benefits of these shoes. If elites are economical anyway. Eliud Kipchoge, he may be a 2:03 marathoner in Crocs and a 2:01 marathoner in super shoes. So the guy's moves pretty well anyway. Whereas maybe your average Joe which is not a 3:15 person, but if someone that's, running 3 times a week, they probably have more area to improve in that running economy. So that's where you might see that the benefit for someone that's running this time is possibly even more than the elites are going to get. Where you do sort of have to maybe look at the differences between the elites is the time. So for someone that's out there for 3 hours and 20, that shoe that's comfortable for 3 hours and 20 minutes is probably a very different shoe that's comfortable for 2 hours and 20 minutes or 4 hours and 20 minutes. So, I'm not picking the same shoe for those different times. So, if I'm going for a 2 hour run, I might like a certain shoe, but I'm not going to like the same shoe for a 4 hour run. I'd probably pick something a bit different. So I think that's more the point with sort of time-based stuff like that, rather than saying, hey, these guys are running a lot faster than me, this shoe's going to be better for them.
Yeah, I think we kind of went through that question a little bit in what we would recommend is kind of finding someone, again, who's similar to you, who runs kind of like you around similar times, and finding out what their likes and dislikes are in certain shoes, and use each other, bounce off each other. Because as we went through, Stu and I, whilst we are similar-ish, we like 2 different things. So I would try and get as much information from different shoes as you can to find out what other people in that range are running a little bit as well. Unfortunately, there's no one shoe best case for everyone. So that answered it, but also didn't answer it, I'm sure, at the same time. Why is Peeba so soft, Stu?
I'm not a chemist, so I'm not going to be able to...
Any super foam.
I'm not going to be able to give you the... But basically, that's where you're getting the benefit from. So we want it to be soft. So it goes back to that compliance and that resilience. So you want to be able to get the energy return out of these foams, you need them to squish down and spring back. So having that softness is where you're getting the benefit. So that's why they're going higher and stuff like that, because it gives you more room to squish them down, and that's springing back up. So these super compliant foams are the benefit of having, a Peeba or something like that, is the amount of squish and energy return you're going to get out of them. So I believe
a little bit. I'm not a chemist either, but basically they've been able to get these rubberized foams, been able to get more air in them, so they keep them light. But it's also very resilient and bouncy, and it comes back a lot faster. Whereas your traditional EVA, if you put that much air into it, it's
like
not going to
jumping into a beanbag.
Yeah, it's not going to be as durable. It won't bounce back as fast. So they needed these new foams to be more kind of compliant. But then with the amount of it they could get underfoot, you need the plate of some description to then provide some extra stability as well. Or I guess kind of running into that durability, how long will a super shoe last?
Yeah, so I think we kind of touched on this too a bit. But look, I would say, personally, I would be racing in a shoe that's somewhere, if I wanted to absolutely optimal, I'd be racing in a foam no older than sort of 200 Ks. that doesn't mean that I'm then throwing that shoe out. Like I still use it in training, but I think sort of the first 200 Ks in these shoes is probably where you're getting the best out of them. Once again, we probably have the benefit that we have a few that we get to test and stuff like that, so it might be easier for me. But maybe even up to that sort of 300 Ks, you're probably not going to lose much out of these. So yeah, I think durability-wise, the shoes are going to have a long life. Somewhere within normal range of that sort of 500 to 800 Ks, if you're treating them right, it's going to be the upper and the outsole that probably goes first on these. But yeah, racing-wise, that's sort of where I look at.
Yeah, the upper and the outsole are probably going to be the two highest wear areas, and that's, again, another case of your biomechanics and the stresses that Stu puts through a shoe are different to the stresses that I put through a shoe. We land in different places, so Stu might be able to wear through a shoe in, well...
This one I wear through very quickly, just
in one or two runs, whereas I can wear it repeatedly just because of the way I land on a particular shoe, where there are other shoes which Stu can't wear out, surprisingly, as well. So try and find your wear patterns, especially when it comes to outsoles. Know your wear areas, and then pick a shoe that kind of relates to that. I do know Mizuno has a very high abrasion outsole, and Stu does find it tough to wear through that. And
it's
pretty
like,
hard on shoes.
I don't know what they've done with the outsole on that one, but I mean, I love the Endorphin Elite from Saucony. Like I ran in this one on the weekend in a race here, and wears out really quickly for me. Like it's not something that we see with a lot of people, but I tend to wear through this shoe really quickly. Mizuno, on the other hand, I can't get through their outsole. So, it's something where I don't know what they're necessarily doing, or if it's just where I happen to land in that shoe, but I can't seem to wear through that shoe. So I love the fact that that's got an outsole that, is going to last a long time for me, because then I can keep using that shoe.
Yeah. Another question we've almost touched on, but we'll touch on again. How much should a runner on any level use a super shoe in training, long runs, tempos, or easy runs? Stu, you want to go over this again?
Yeah, once again, I'd say just avoiding the extreme. So, probably not all the time and probably not never. Somewhere in the middle. So, yeah, like your faster training runs, I think it's fine to use them. Your long runs, I'd also say, like I like a long run in this shoe, probably more for the recovery benefits than anything. I think we're seeing, if you look at the videos of up in Kenya, all the top runners there, they're doing at least sort of 50% of their running in these shoes, whether that's because that's the only shoe that their manager hands them, or if that's their choice, who knows. But we're seeing a lot of people running in them. There's maybe a slight shift in the other direction with some groups now, where they're saying, look, let's save our shoes for racing. But I still think either way, if you're going to be racing in a shoe, you need to be doing a bit of training in that shoe, because you want to be confident on race day that you don't get blisters, that it works for you. Yeah,
horses for courses. For me, especially if I'm coming up towards a race, I'll definitely get in the shoe that I want to wear early enough to be able to kind of acclimatise to that shoe. I will use them in everyday running as well, but again, it's a bit like the diet. A little bit of everything in moderation is going to be best. This is my favourite question. What companies make super shoes available in a wide or 2E size?
Well, it's a simple answer. New Balance.
Yes, and more need to.
Yeah, so New Balance, the Super Comp Elite, that's it. Theirs comes in a 2E. I guess you can argue that Ultra, the vanished carbon from them, so all Ultra shoes. We don't have one here, but they're basically, all of their shoes, they call it foot-shaped. Basically, it means it's a bit wider through that forefoot area there. So technically speaking, that's going to have a wider forefoot, but the rest of it will be a standard fit. But New Balance, like we've found that's been super popular, basically because a lot of people want that wider fit, and that's the only option. So I actually think we might have sold out of them, but there will be more coming, I'm sure.
So the answer is more companies need to do them, but New Balance currently. Next question is, I would like to know the value of super shoes for slower runners. Again, this is something we touched on a little bit anyway. Obviously we've been through maybe the shoe that you're going to pick for a 2-hour run isn't the shoe that you'd pick for a 3-hour run or a 4-hour run. So picking a shoe that's kind of stable in the heel, I think, especially for slower. I don't like to use the term slower. I mean, you're just enjoying
We're all
the
getting
course
there
more.
eventually.
Exactly. Pick something which is just a little bit more stable and comfortable as well on foot, because you're going to be in it for a longer period of time. Some of the ASICS shoes, maybe they're a bit more narrow in the heel. So if I know I'm going to be out there for a long, long time, I might not pick that one. Whereas the Endorphin Elite from Saucony has a slightly wider kind of platform in the heel, and so something like that I will pick. I know Salomon also makes a super shoe with a wider heel base and still has that PIBA foam through it. What else we got? We got things to consider when buying your first carbon shoe. Again, we went through this a little bit.
We've kind of touched on that one. There's plenty of options now. Every top brand has a carbon shoe, has a super shoe, has something in that area. So if you've had a brand in the past that sort of fits you, it's worth sort of trying theirs on, see how it works.
Go for comfort.
Yeah, exactly. Comfort is a good guide. It's always been something that we would say in our retail is that you can go into the shoe tech and all this as much as you want, but research has suggested that if you put a shoe on and it feels comfortable, it's probably the shoe you're least likely to get injured in because it fits you. So it's a good start.
The stack height question, which we did answer earlier, thanks to our Mizuno shoes there. What is meant by stack height? Also, what is meant by neutral shoes and stability shoes? I guess, Stu, you can answer this one.
Yeah, it's a bit of a moving target, I'd say, at the moment. So, you don't have to go back too many years to see that basically all running shoes were broken into three categories. You had your neutral shoes, you had your stability shoes, and then you had your racing trail sort of categories off to the side. But now brands have sort of shifted away from those sort of clear delineations, where it's basically a neutral shoe is for anyone that, where is a shoe here? So anyone that sort of, we all sort of land slightly towards the outside of a shoe, generally speaking. So if you're landing and rolling straight through, a neutral shoe is the way to go. We used to think that sort of any degree of pronation, so pronation is rolling inward, so it's that, as you're sort of coming in, your arch collapses, which is a natural part of the sort of shock absorption of running, is your arch is meant to sort of give, and that's how you're going to absorb. If you pronate too far and sort of come over the edge, that's when we sort of, with shoes, we look at sort of correcting that. So brands used to put a sort of a harder sort of chunk of foam through the arch there, which would stop that rolling in. So yeah, a lot of pronation was basically, we would stop it with these. And there's a chance that maybe that was over prescribed. It was a big chunk of business for a lot of the brands in terms of where their stability shoes sat. But now a lot of the brands, like, now that Hoka and some of these brands have come out with these much higher stack shoes, we've realised that there's other ways to sort of get some stability. So, with a shoe like this, you can see it's sort of flared and a lot wider there, and you're no longer sort of sitting on top of the foam. You do sort of sit in the foam there, so you're cradled. So without it having that sort of stiff arch and structure there, they are a lot more stable. So we're seeing sort of a lot of people that maybe previously thought or did need a stability shoe and now getting away with what we would sort of classify as a stable neutral shoe, and that traditional stability sort of style shoe is maybe shifting away. Technically speaking, all your sort of carbon and racing super shoe stuff will, on paper we're going to say that's neutral for sure. Within that, there is variation in what we would say is also a stable shoe and what's maybe on the less stable side, and that's once again where it comes to sort of having a discussion and working out maybe which one works for you, and are you going to need something that's maybe a little bit more stable, or are you fine with maybe something on the extreme side like a Mizuno one there.
Yeah. Another question we have answered as well: can you do all your runs in the carbon plated shoes? I feel this one comes up a lot. You can.
Proof that you can.
You can,
unless I somehow implode in the next year or something.
And then someone has asked, I'm fairly new to the running game, using a mix of different runs during my soccer off-season to keep my fitness levels up. I only have one pair of runners and don't intend to buy different pairs for different runs or having a rotation. Should my one pair of runners have a plate or not really? Stu, what do you think?
I think this probably comes back to that sort of one shoe in the middle. So if I was only going to have one shoe, I'd like something that, I still feel fast in if I'm going to go, whether it's just a park run or it's a race or, just I want to go for a hard run myself. I do like the feel of a faster shoe. So, there's plenty of options in this area. So I'd say Endorphin Speed is a really good option. Puma Deviate Nitro, that's in that area. Brooks, they have the Hyperion. So you've got I'd say probably every brand now. Maybe, they have an option in that area. Mizuno, you've got the Rebellion Flash. So it's almost just that takedown of their racing models. You maybe what you gain in a little bit of the weight and stuff like that, which is not significant, but it's something. It then sort of moves it more into that you're able to do some daily miles and should feel just as good as it will when you're picking up the pace.
Yeah, it becomes a little bit more durable. But I also think, and we've touched on them as well with something like the Asics or the New Balance Balos, you can get those super foams without a plate as well. So once again, I'd almost say try a few on, some with plates, some without, and see what's more comfortable and what you're chasing, because I think you can get that versatility of being able to do a fast session, being able to do an easy run, being able to do a long run in a shoe with a plate, and also a shoe without a plate.
Yep.
We have a few more questions on the chat, going through them. We have answered a couple of them. What is the most durable shoe? I feel as though we've gone through that about 6 times.
Yeah. In terms of super shoes for me personally, I'd say Mizuno is probably up there though.
Okay.
Mizuno, I find Addy pretty good in terms of durability. I've never had an issue with them. Once again, it's probably because I tear through the outsole. So yeah, having that continental rubber in the outsole of Addy has always worked well for me. I mean, Nathan, you're probably going to have different shoes that work well for you because you don't tear through the outsole like me for some reason.
Yeah, you have to know your wear points and kind of what goes first in a shoe for you, because especially once you get into the racing shoes, they are so light and they've kind of strip away everything but the bare minimum. So if you want a durable shoe, maybe take it down that step to something like the Endorphin Speed, the Puma Deviate Nitro, which adds back that little bit of durability, but also adds that little bit of weight. I think those are going to be good options if you're really chasing a durable shoe, or again, going to something like the New Balance Balos or the Asics to be able to get that durability of a daily trainer. You will lose a little bit of that kind of speed or responsiveness though. We also have, I feel like my carbon shoes wear quite quickly, not very durable, or is that the case, or am I imagining it?
No, I'd say you're probably right. So, that might come down to, we're sort of discussing the foam. So once again, I really love this shoe. I picked it for most races, but durability outsole for me is shocking. I can notice wear on this shoe in almost one run. It's a chance that that's maybe something similar you're experiencing, whether it's the upper or the outsole or whatever. Foam wise, once again, I don't think you probably shouldn't be wearing through them that quick. If that's the case, maybe it's worth looking at a shoe that maybe is a little bit firmer underfoot. You might be putting more load through that shoe, and it needs to it needs a bit more density in the foam there. Comes down to sort of personal biomechanics and stuff again. So yeah, that's worth considering, but I'd say, start off with looking at where it's wearing and what's happening there. But foam-wise, you should be getting sort of a decent amount of durability out of your race shoes, unless you have that $750 Adidas shoe, which I think only 6 people got them. So.
Because even in the different types of foams, and each company kind of makes them at different densities, different levels of firmness. So you're going to find, okay, one might just be a little bit firmer, but it might last me a little bit longer, and that's what I'm chasing. Or you might be, like a guy like me who wants the lightest, softest possible shoe when they're racing, and doesn't matter, or Stu even for that matter. You're happy to wear through it within a couple of runs, or one run if you're doing a marathon in Stu's case. Last question on the chat. Are carbon plates only for the elites, or will slower runners also see the benefit? Again, we answered that a little bit, but...
Yep. Yeah, I think we sort of touched on this, that, it's not something that only benefits the elites. It's, you're seeing... Arguably, you could see a bigger benefit with a lot of your sort of everyday runners. A lot of the research out there has suggested that it's, one study showed that the benefit for your everyday runner was a lot more. There's other studies that show that, maybe at slower speeds, the benefit's no longer 4%, it's more like 3 or 2. It's still early days with this stuff, so there'll be a lot more research, but I don't think there's been anything yet that suggested that people are worse in these shoes. So you're going to get benefits whether you run 3 times a week and you just want that little extra edge on, for your park run or a race, or if you are an elite going for a PB or a Boston qualifier or something like that. So, they seem like a scary shoe when, you start talking about carb and you start talking about all these foams, but if it's something where you want a benefit, I think they can work for everyone.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so that's pretty much wrapped up our talk, our questions. I'd like to say thank you to everyone for joining us on the new Running Warehouse Australia Runners Series Community Talk. If you do have any more questions at all that you want answered, feel free to email us at info@runningwarehouse.com.au. You can check out, obviously, all your shoe needs at runningwarehouse.com.au. Stu, do you have anything left for the people?
No. Get out there and go for a run.
Thanks for joining us, and have a good evening.